So the first Zelda game was an okay attempt, but it was like trying to read an old school roadmap from like the 70s. And Zelda 2 was a little too much like Super Mario, but they got it right with A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. These are the blueprints to the whole franchise. From that point on, Nintendo would make the main console Zelda game and the mobile game Zelda game. From 2001 Game Boy Color to around 2005 Game Boy Advance, old school Zelda was making a pretty big comeback. Despite having two hugely successful open world 3D games, Zelda still had this huge mobile game potential. You could argue that Zelda worked best as a 2D overhead style adventure game. Also, Nintendo's Game Boys were selling like hotcakes, and they just needed more games anyway. They even re-released the 4 Zelda games on Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance at some point. Now this kind of changed in the DS era with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. This is late 2000s, and despite the popularity of the franchise at this point, and despite these two games being literal sequels to the Wind Waker masterpiece, the ratings and sales were pretty embarrassing. Mobile game Zelda had kind of fallen off by the time Skyward Sword had come out. The 3DS era, Link Between Worlds, met the mobile Zelda standard pretty well, while Triforce Heroes didn't sell well and is one of the worst rated Zelda games in the franchise. I think people were just over the multiplayer Zelda games at that point. If it's meant to be a single player game, why push it to be a multiplayer game? Again, you're trying to be like Mario, you're not Mario. The 3DS remake of Ocarina of Time was super successful to the point where Nintendo wasn't expecting it. They were surprised. And so they went ahead and graced us with the Majora's Mask 3DS. This new Switch era of mobile Zelda is interesting because their main console Zelda game can be played on their mobile device now. But Nintendo is still trying to keep that old school Link to the Past feeling as a separate experience, as you can see with their remake of Link's Awakening and their newest one to date, Echoes of Wisdom, where the twist is you get to play as Zelda. From what I can tell, it didn't sell great, but it did better than Spirit Tracks and Triforce Heroes. But this is how it's always been actually, and this is how it's going to continue. Zelda games are split between the big realistic open world version and the cartoony throwback version.